Well, thank you. Um, Sorry about what's happening in my country right now. There's not much I can do. If I could, I would. There's a lot of us feeling a little bit of depression around that. Let's just put it like that. Um, but yeah, thanks for the welcome. It's nice to be here, and especially I'm excited to sign the big green chair. A lot of fine people have signed that chair, and I'm really excited to do that. I feel like that's the whole reason I've come to the UK this time. Um, yeah, so what do I do? What do I want to say? I mean, if I look at the speakers list, and I looked at every speaker that I could find on the program here, and kind of tried to figure out what's going on here at the Seed Festival, and what could I contribute. And I want to be helpful. I want to offer something useful, and so I'm kind of looking at all the families and all the children, and how nice is it that the sun came out today, right? Because last night it was a little bit worrisome, I think, when I turned the corner and there was people throwing straw down at the entrance where the cars were already getting stuck, and I thought, oh no. But then I thought, wait, this is England. I live in California, so I've gotten a little bit soft, right? I won't see rain in my home until October, because it really literally won't rain until October. And but then I guess you guys are used to it. Someone asked me if I'd brought the rubber boots, and, well, I didn't. So anyway, I just thought, okay, a lot of young people, a lot of families, a lot of people wandering around. What is a festival? Why do we come to them? I guess mainly they're fun, right? Is that why you come? Do you come because you want lessons to save the world, or to change your life, or to inspire some big shift, or... Yeah? Okay. I just wonder about the role of festivals, because I feel like, this is a really amazing lineup. I mean, the people who have been speaking and what they've been speaking about, incredible. If you could just take all of it and just map it out and plop it down in your hometown, everything would be fine, wouldn't it? Why doesn't that happen? Why? We already know all the answers, don't we? I mean, if you just look at the lineup again and you just read through all the bios and read through all the things that people are talking about, the whole pattern is already here, isn't it? It's like there's already a map. So we're done. Why don't we just have fun for the rest of the next couple of days and call it good? Why doesn't things change, And this is the question that launched I won't call it a career. Because if you ask my family if I've had a career, no, they just shake their head and they get real sad. I could have made something of myself is how they'll respond, right? I could have been somebody. Jonathan, you're so smart. Why are you wasting your time with these things? It's kind of how I got treated when I was expressing with passion what I wanted to do in 1979 and 80. And so off I went. And now I'm looking back over 40 years and saying, what was that? And was it helpful? And how was it helpful if it was helpful, right? But I started out because in 1979, I was at university, and I was so excited to go to college to be with other naturalists, because from a young age, I was catching frogs and snakes and turtles and taking care of a little menagerie of things and beings. And my grandmother from Ireland was helping me with that. And I was really connected and really in love with the beings of my place. And I couldn't wait to be a wildlife biologist when I grew up, and wander in the wilderness and get paid to do it and look after animals. But I think a lot of people have that dream when they're in high school, and they think that they could do that, and they could actually get paid to wander in the woods and be a wildlife biologist. And very few people actually get that job. And if they do, a lot of them tell me that they ended up in an office doing paperwork and reviewing data, and they don't get out in the field much, right? So that was sort of an illusion that I was chasing, but I was sensing there must be something out there for us, nature lovers, right? So I went off to college, and I thought, okay, well, finally I'll get away from my suburban New York City bedroom community consumeristic neighbors, and I'll get to go to my university where all these people who are just like me are going to show up, and we're all going to get to hang out, and it's going to be great. And I got to college, and my first time I went into the biology class, there was 500 people in the auditorium, and it was like going to the movies. You know, the professor was way down there on stage, and he had this big screen, and he was going through his notes, and it was all the same stuff I had got in AP biology in high school. And I thought, what is this? It's just like, not only am I not meeting these naturalist types, there's more people who seem disconnected than ever before. So I started to look around my state of New Jersey, and I started to look around at the places that I had grown up, cultivating a mad love affair with all the beings and plants of my place. And little by little, the bulldozers were taking it down and putting in, you know, subdivisions and parking lots and strip malls and all that. And I noticed the turtles that lay eggs in the ground, the box turtles that walk around on the land, not in the water, were disappearing. You know, and I started to notice that every year since I was a little boy, I would find baby ones. You know, this year's babies hatching out of the ground, running all over the place, and every year you found babies, and it was kind of exciting. It's sort of like the first strawberries of spring, you know, when you find them, how excited you are. Well, when you saw your first baby box turtle, it was something to be delighted over because, well, first of all, they're incredibly cute. And second, it's just amazing to me that these little ancient beings are reproducing, and more every year, there they are. But as I got older, starting from around 12, 13, by the time I was 19, I was only finding 9 and 10-year-old turtles, you know, and everybody was older than that. There was no more babies. So I could see it wasn't going to be long before there was no more box turtles. I noticed the milk snakes that I grew up catching as a boy were also gone. The corn snakes, I couldn't find them anymore, the rat snakes, and, you know, I could go down the list, but I don't want to depress you, but what I basically saw was it was like the tide of diversity in life right in my neighborhood was receding, and it wasn't coming back in, right? Everybody probably knows that that's going on all over our planet, yeah? I don't need to tell you about that. But in 1979, I'm at university, I'm thinking about the tide of life receding, and I'm thinking about, why do my neighbors not care, you know? There wasn't a seed festival in 1979 in New Jersey, that's for sure, okay? There wasn't people who would even think about going to a festival like this in 1979 where I grew up. They would just think it was ridiculous. Why would you do that? Why would anyone want to do that, they would say, right? So, you know, I thought, well, wait a minute. I was born here, 1960. I was raised here. Why do I care? Why do I care? Maybe if I can answer that question, we could bottle whatever it was that caused me to care, and we could like fly over in airplanes and spray it over suburbia instead of pesticides for mosquitoes, right? That's what I started thinking about. And that's what started my research. I wanted to understand why some people cared and some people didn't. I wanted to understand, it became pretty obvious. There was that 3-word action statement that somebody got famous a long time ago that basically said, we only care about what we love, and, you know, we only love what we bond with, basically, right? So the answer to me was like bonding. If I could get my neighbors to bond to nature, maybe they would fall in love with it, at which point they would care, right? Because I think the reason you're all here is because you all love this earth, and you all love the beings of the earth, and you all love the possibility of humans having a peaceful, coexistent, beautiful world. Would you agree or not agree? I mean, who else would come to the Seed Festival? So I don't think that's the problem here. But what about all the people who don't care? How do we get them to care? Because ultimately, that's what I'm feeling, right? So I thought, okay, I was really mad about the fact that they bulldozed my nature spot and they turned it into a subdivision. I was really mad about that. And actually, more than mad, I was crushed, obviously, really sad about it because I'd spent 8 years there at this place and building relationships with all these beings, you know. And when I got to college and I was standing at the field ecology course with my professor, who a wonderful mentor to me. I really, really loved this guy. And the other professor that was an ornithologist, the person who specializes in the study of birds, they had brought maybe 30 of us in a bus out to this place to go learn this conservation ecology work. And we were going to go out in the landscape, and we were going to learn to read the trees to be able to tell what happened on that land 100 or 200 years ago. That's what this course was about, okay? And then bird diversity in different habitats. And so we're standing just outside the bus. And we're standing in this gravel parking lot, and we're in kind of a half circle because the professors are standing over here, and they're giving us our instructions. Put your backpacks here, blah, blah, blah. You know, the bus is going to pull away, can't stay here, so it'll be back at da-da-da. Here's where we're putting our lunches and things like that. So they're giving the instructions, and we're all standing in this half circle facing them, and all of a sudden I see this signature behavior of songbirds coming towards us, and I point in that direction, and I said out loud with great enthusiasm, "Cooper's hawk," okay, which for you guys would be a sparrowhawk. Okay, the Cooper's hawk's slightly bigger than your sparrowhawk. So the two professors look, and all the students kind of look because I sort of interrupted them in their spiel, you know what I mean? So it was kind of an awkward moment a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. But it is New Jersey, and we're all rude, so it's okay, you know. So what happens next is that they all look over there, and then the professor looks back at me and he says, "Where?" And I said, "It's coming." And then the professor says, "That's impossible," you know. "How do you know that?" I'm like, "Bird language. That's impossible," I get. So all the students look at me like, ha, ha, ha. But just then, here comes the Cooper's hawk, just in time, while everyone's attention was just enough there. Here it comes flying through, and the ornithologist looks at it, looks at the other professor. They look at me pissed. They're angry at me. And then the Cooper's hawk flies on through, and the two of them look at me like, well, I don't even know what the look was, because I don't think this look ever had to be issued for a 19-year-old field ecology student before, right? This was unprecedented in their experience. And I did a few more things like that with these professors over the next couple of weeks, and then they started to ask me a whole bunch of questions, like, how do you know all this stuff? Right? Because I knew all the tracks and sign of the animals that were moving around. I knew the bird language. I could tell where the fox was and where the hawks were. And what really troubled me was I'm looking around at my peers asking the question, what? Say it again, please. Yeah, why don't you all see this? And of all people, why don't my professors see it? I look up to these two men, and I still do. They're amazing, and they taught me so much. Why don't they know it? Another question. Why do I know it? How do I know it? How did that happen? There's no chance I would have accidentally learned bird language. Not a chance. I've been all over the world studying bird language. I've been all over the world studying people who know bird language, indigenous people. And I've been all over the world with bird conservation people and bird experts, and I have not met yet a modern bird language master who came from the modern world and who knows bird language intimately. I've only met indigenous people who know it intimately. And they have the same response. When I ask them about it, they're like, "Why are you asking me about it?" And I'm like, "Because it's fascinating that you all know all of this." And then they say to me, "Everybody knows this." And then I say to them, "No, not where I'm from. Not everybody knows it." So I'm fascinated. How come I learned it? I know why, because I'm a genius. I was born savant genius for bird language, right? That must be it. Nope. I know it because my neighbor, 7 years, asked me questions every day about bird language. He just asked me questions that I could answer easily. And then when I ran out of easy answers, he asked me questions right on the edge of my awareness that made me have to guess. And then his BS meter would go into the red. He'd get that look on his face. He'd shake his head and he'd say, "Go find out." And the next day, he'd call me and see if I found out. Every day for 7 years. I had no idea I signed up for bird language. I didn't have any idea. But at 19, I knew all the bird language. Like, I haven't learned more bird language since I was a teenager. All I'm doing is refining the 90% that's already in here. You get it? My nervous system is totally tuned for it. And all the rest is detail. How did that guy do it? My neighbor. I started to look into it. I started to study. I was studying natural history. I realized I wasn't going to get that biology job where I get to walk around in the woods. I started turning my attention towards comparative cultural anthropology and started combining natural history learning and comparative cultural anthropology because I'm trying to understand, why do some people connect every single person in the entire village to nature and get them super connected, and other villages, like the one I grew up in, don't? That was my thesis question for my entire life. For the last 40 years, that's all I've been thinking about. I'm not very fun to talk to on the airplane. Okay? Nobody really wants to hear what I do for a living. They get really eyes glaze over pretty quickly. And maybe it's not even, like, a living is probably also a stretch. So what I started to do is I started to collect, let's just call each of these, do you guys have Legos in the UK? Legos, little plastic blocks that clip together. Okay. Who here has stepped on a Lego barefoot? Okay, I want to know that because that's important. So, little bricks? Lego bricks. Okay, Lego bricks. So, Lego bricks hurt when you step on them in the night, when you're moving through the room where the kids have left them all over the floor. And when you're trying to build something specific with Lego bricks, and all you've got, back in the day when I was a kid, when a refrigerator, by the way, our refrigerators in the U.S. are so much bigger than yours. Just saying, And I'm not proud of that. But we used to get our refrigerators came in cardboard boxes, okay? Why would you put a refrigerator in a cardboard box? I don't know, but we used to do that, okay? So then you get home they deliver a cardboard box with a refrigerator in it, and then you have to get it out of the box out of the refrigerator out of the box. But then the kids got to play with this giant cardboard box, and that box was awesome, right? And you'd play with it until it finally just gave out, right? The thing would finally just give out. But I want you to imagine Lego bricks of all sorts and kinds in a refrigerator box to the top. And it can be a UK refrigerator cardboard box. It doesn't have to be a US refrigerator cardboard box. But the only Legos you're going to really play with, first of all, your mom and dad aren't going to let you take that cardboard box and dump it on the living room floor because that would be a nightmare. All they can imagine is the 4 a.m. stomp on the Lego brick experience in bare feet on the way to the bathroom. They're not going to let those Lego bricks spread out all over the house. Keep them in the box. Play with the ones that you can get on the top. And the rest of the ones that are way down on the bottom are never going to be touched. Right? You'll never see them again. You with me on that? As I started to collect Lego bricks for what these indigenous communities were doing to connect everybody to nature, I started throwing them in a refrigerator box. And pretty soon I had thousands of these things in this box. And these were things that indigenous people were doing every day that modern people weren't doing anymore. And I wondered which ones were responsible for connecting people, bonding people to nature so that they would not only gain knowledge, but they would fall in love with nature. Because the bird language thing was not my goal. Are you with me? I didn't care about learning bird language. I loved nature. That's all. But that man who was cultivating my relationship with bird language was also cultivating my relationship with plants, with trees, with what's edible, what's poisonous, what you can make string from, how to find the tracks and sign of things, right? So I was literally raised as an indigenous hunter-gatherer tracker in New Jersey. And I had no idea that that was happening. I know that sounds really far out there, but I'm telling you, I had no idea that was happening. He was coming from a lineage that he calls coyote teaching. Coyote in America and all the indigenous lore and legend represents kind of what the fox does in the UK, which is, you know, the trickster, right? Trickster transformer, always on the edge, always playing tricks with you and your awareness. Raven, raccoon, coyote, spider, all of them have the reputation in North America as the trickster. What does the trickster do? In one old song from the land where I live, one old song, the song for coyote, for wolf, and for fox. It's the song that honors the nation of the dogs, okay? It says, "Around the edge I am traveling. Around the edge I am traveling. In a sacred manner I am traveling." So I start to wind my way into that song. What does this song mean? And I ask one of the elders, and he says to me, and this guy grew up with grandmas and grandpas as an indigenous man. He did not go to the reservation schools. He didn't go to the, you know, he was raised traditionally with his language and with the ways of his people. One of the last of his kind in North America. His name was Gilbert Walking Bull. And he says, and by the way, before he was born, his grandmother said, "We know his name, and his name is Ishnalawicha," which means he who will walk alone. And he was named in honor of a great scout, a scout being somebody who learns all the ways of the animals and the plants and the trees and the tracks and the bird language, who has the mission of going out, gathering information, and bringing it back to the tribe, right? So he's the eyes and ears of the tribe, a scout. Okay, so they spent a lot of time alone. But his name had multiple meanings, because being the last one who had the knowledge, he would also walk alone. Because all those who had been raised on the reservations didn't have the knowledge anymore, and when he went back to the reservation to try to teach it to them, they kicked him out and chased him away and told him that that wasn't our knowledge, meaning the knowledge of their people. Because they now had something which is called Stockholm Syndrome. You know what that is? You know, you basically begin to identify with and have empathy for your captors, and actually you become like them, right? They were no longer in their knowledge base. He tried. And then he found people like me who basically I would basically hang on every word and write down everything he said and record every conversation, because here was a voice from ancient knowledge that was holed in this lineage of understanding. And I wanted to know everything this man knew. And when he passed away in 2007 at 78, I was like, oh my God, he had 20 more years in him for sure. He was so healthy and fit, but I think he was just done. He was so lonely, right? He was so in between these worlds. Yeah, I love that guy. I said, what does that song mean? Gilbert, what does that song mean, you know? He said, around the edge I'm traveling. Around the edge I'm traveling, in a secret manner I'm traveling. I'm like, yeah, I read the translation, Gilbert, already. He's like, oh, you mean what does it mean? I'm like, yeah, what does it mean? He says, oh, I thought you wanted to know what the translation was. I'm like, no, I already got that part. He said, no, he said, you know, my people, we travel around like nomadic people. You know, back in the day when my people were free, we wander this land. And we set up a camp. We set up our lodges, and so we spend their time, because buffaloes are not too far away, next valley over. We set up camp not too close to them so they don't get afraid of us, and our scouts go and watch over the buffalo, and we make a plan. How are we going to hunt some of them for our families, you know? And he said, but you know, when you set your camp up, he said, the grass is so tall. Everywhere you have to flatten the grass down like this. He said, because otherwise your children get lost in there. And he said, we have rattlesnakes all over the prairie, and it's dangerous, so we have to flatten the grass for our people, he said. So we have these dances. Everybody thinks they're fancy dances for powwows, he said, but nobody even remembers where these dances come from. Fancy dances where the people are whirling their legs this way and that, swirling everywhere. He said that was to flatten the grass in a way that was fun. Everybody would enjoy it, he said. Right? Nobody even remembers this anymore. All right? He said, but that's what it's for. He said, but once you flatten out all the places around, you set up the lodges and the fireplace for the community lodge and where the elders meet with the village headmen and the head women over here. He said, pretty soon all these little footpaths from people forming in the grass. If you could fly over it and look down, it'd be like tree branches. Can you picture this? He said, so I want you to imagine this here, John, when the scouts are coming into the village. He said they walk from place where the grass is waist high for as far as your eyes could see, and you start to see animal trails forming in the grass that are new trails that are as old, formed only as old as our people have been camping here. He said, these are the trails of the wolf and the coyote and the fox. They only come so close to our village, and then they start to turn left or they turn right, and they make a circle around the edge of our village. Only the scouts know that they're there. Most everybody is clueless inside that village that the fox is so close by or wolf is just watching from the edge. That's what that song means. I'm like, coyote teaching. John, what did you do today? Oh, I went fishing, Tom. Where'd you go? I went down to the catfish pond. Which way did you go when you went there? I'm like, I walked down past Warbler's Corner and then down over past the hinge tree, and then I walked down by the Little Frog Pond. I went up the hill, got out into the strawberry fields and the locust grove, and then I walked down towards the sand cliffs. He said, which way did you go from there? I don't remember. What do you mean you don't remember? The last 100 yards to the pond, you don't remember? I'm like, no, I don't remember. He said, so you got to the top of the sand cliffs and you don't remember what you did from there. Did you fly? I'm like, no, I didn't fly. How'd you go? I said, I don't remember. He said, what does that mean? You don't remember. Were you in your body? Who was in your body that walked it down to the catfish pond? Go tomorrow and tell me which way you went. Because he knew that place very well. He made me name every place. And then he said, go find your tracks. So the next day after school, I go down to the catfish pond. I don't really need an excuse to go to the catfish pond because I like the catfish pond. I like fishing there. It's super fun. I go down to the catfish pond. And as I'm going down to the catfish pond, I get to the top of the cliffs, and I see my footprints. And I had walked down the horse trail. I didn't go down the shortcut. I walked down the horse trail, and then I turned left, went across. And then as I saw my tracks and started walking over my own tracks, I remembered being there. But then I started thinking, why didn't I actually remember being here yesterday? Because now I'm remembering being here. So when he called me that night, I told him what happened. You know? And he said, you going to let that happen again? I'm like, what? That your body's walking, but you're not in it? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe. Well, he kept working on that with me. One day he said, hey, you came in from the catfish pond. What time did you pop out of Drucker's Woods? Because I told him which way I came back. What time did you pop out onto the cul-de-sac? And I told him what time it was. He said, it was getting dark, wasn't it? I'm like, yeah, it was just starting to get dark. He said, what did you hear as you stepped out of the woods? I'm like, nothing. He says, was there birds? I'm like, no, it's quiet. Quiet, he says. Quiet. Are you sure? Well, maybe now I'm not so sure. Why? He says, tomorrow night at the same time, be at that same spot. I'll call you tomorrow night. Click. Next night, I pop out of the woods, come down that little hill, and to my horror, it is a full-on cacophony of bird sounds. You know, like when the blackbird goes to sleep at night and how much noise they make just as it's getting dark? Okay, so several species of birds have that behavior, but they were in a group roost in this hemlock hedge, and the hemlock is like a tree in North America. When it's small, it makes a good hedge, and then it grows up into a forest canopy tree. Well, there was a whole hedge of these hemlocks that were parked on the edge of this yard, And they were full. You know, they were from here to the big green chair, thick, and maybe they were about this tall, and they made a really good roosting spot, you know, sleeping spot for the birds. There's probably 25 or 30 of them in there making their noise, and they were noisy. And I'm standing there at the edge of darkness, at the edge of the forest, looking at my parents' house with the front light on, listening to this hedge going off, and realizing how busted I am. My best hope was that they landed there today. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew what questions were coming already. Well, the phone rings, and he is absolutely amused by the story I'm telling to try to get myself out of this one. But he says, how about tomorrow in the daylight, as soon as you get off the bus, you go straight to that hemlock hedge and tell me, how long have those birds been in there? So I did that, and there was bird poop on top of feathers that fell out of the bodies from preening in the roost, layers of them. And they're only in there from sunset till sunrise. I'm like, oh no. This has been going on for weeks. And the worst part is I've been passing by it every night at this time. And for weeks. And he knows that because he's called me every night. And he only talks to me for 15 minutes. How efficient is that? You could do away with the education system, my one friend told me. He said, if a teacher could spend 15 minutes with you every day and ask you good questions like that and then send you on hours worth of adventures where we're self-directed learning, think of how much money we would save for the Board of Education. That's coyote teaching. Around the edge I am traveling. In a sacred manner I'm traveling. You with me on that? Where's the edge in this story? It's the edge of my awareness of myself. It's the edge of my awareness of my connection to the world around me. It's the edge of my awareness and my understanding of the people around me. Because all three of those territories are fair game for a coyote teacher. They ask you questions about you. They ask you questions about your relationship to the things around you, the wild beings, the earth, the stars, the sun, the weather, the wind, the four directions. All of this was fair game for me growing up. All of these questions were asked. And then when I had issues with my sister or with my parents, he'd always ask me questions until I saw my own relationship to those issues. So even there's questions for how we are with each other. Around the edge I am traveling. Coyote mentoring. We put a lot of this in a book called Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature, which came out in, 2007 or 2008. And that book's been slowly but surely going around the world, and people are using it quite a bit because I basically took a lot of the research on coyote mentoring and just put it in there, like a recipe book. Do this. Do this with your children. Even if you don't understand how it works, just do it anyway and be amazed at what happens for those children. Because human beings are hardwired to connect with nature. We're hardwired for it. We're born and our nervous system goes like this. These little buds come up and they start to stretch. And they get about that far on their own. If the culture doesn't meet them, the brain says, invest the energy somewhere else. It's called pruning. So that little being there in stripes, smart stripes I'll say, right? Has all this unconscious stuff going on. All these little nerve fibers coming up and reaching, hoping the culture will meet them. Well, I unfortunately said yes to this microphone, Victoria, so I can't do my usual thing, which is, well, I'll do it like this. I hope I didn't just turn it off. Oh, good. So here comes the bud like this. Here comes questions like I used to get on the telephone, and they grab that little hand and they stretch it up. And tomorrow, new ones are coming up. Questions come in, they grab them, and they stretch them up. Does that make sense to you? My grandmother grew up on a farm, and she is from Irish culture and tradition, and her grandmother, her great-grandmother, all did the same kinds of things when I asked her questions. Basically, when I went out as a little boy, when I was that age, when I came in, my grandmother was tending my sister and I. But there's enough trickster left in her culture that she actually knew what to do with my sister and I to build some basic fibers and strengthen them. So by the time I was 10 years old, when I met my neighbor on the street corner, he looked at me and realized that I had more connection going than all the other kids in the neighborhood. I can credit that directly to a thread of culture that was still going in the Irish culture. You with me on that? And I'm sure it's here too. Because all of you are sitting in this tent right now because you love the earth. You wouldn't love the earth if someone didn't cultivate that. We don't automatically love the earth. We're born loving the earth. But if the people in our household don't love it and don't cultivate that in us, we won't get it. The hardest thing in the world is to fix a culture that's broken. The hardest thing in the world is to go back and put back the things that caused the culture to meet the growing nervous system and to stretch it after it's been taken away. Because Stockholm Syndrome is a real thing. And the crazy thing about it, when I pushed the research as far as it would go, the thing that I realized was that, oh no, the Western world is actually a giant ecological layered Stockholm Syndrome. How do we repair that? The answer is go back and look at the playbill for the day here, for this stage and the other stages, and look at what everybody's offering, and make sure that every child in every neighborhood grows up that way. And we're good. I'm telling you, we already know how to do it. It's already there. The problem is the connection is gone. How much time do I have?
About 7.
Days?
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll get this. I got 7 minutes to tell you what the word sacred means. Around the edge I am traveling. Around the edge I am traveling. In a sacred manner I am traveling. Gilbert, I'm looking at these songs, these healing songs, and it says sacred. What does that word mean? Because it makes no sense in the way that it's being used in this song, according to Webster's dictionary. Sacred, pertaining to sacrament, the chalice, the host, the altar. It's all kind of linked to religious thought in the Western definition. This doesn't make sense to me, Gilbert. He said, oh, yeah, he said, my people have different understanding of that word. He said, trouble is priests, Episcopalian priests and Catholic priests are the ones who translate our language for us to English. He said, what they're doing is changing meanings of words so they end up controlling us. I don't know if they do it on purpose, but that is the effect it had on my people. They don't understand meaning of their own words anymore. I said, well, what is sacred in, tell me things that are sacred in your language, in your grandfather's language, in the way that you understand that word. What's sacred? Oh, he said, babies. He said, mothers that are pregnant, mothers in general are sacred also. Elderly people, sacred. Sun is sacred, moon is sacred, stars, he said, little birds, animals, deer, fox, all the creatures, all the things that Creator made that is wild, these are all sacred things. And I said, well, it pretty much sounds like, oh, he said certain songs are sacred songs. He said these words, prayers are sacred prayers. He said these are sacred stories. These stories are more just like entertainment. He said, but in Bible itself, he said there's a few prayers in there that my great-grandfather brought into ceremony. He said, what's with these guys in the black robes? Who are they? What's this book they're carrying? In spirit of my ancestor told my great-grandfather, okay, inside that book there are a few sacred prayers. Lord's Prayer is one. Sermon on the Mount is another one. These are sacred. Rest is like stories, like we use in educating our children. Educational stories, he said. I'm like, Gilbert, it sounds like everything in the universe is sacred. He said, yeah, pretty much. He said that. I said, well, what isn't sacred? He said, we don't use that word to describe adult human beings with children from about age of early 20s into their late 40s, 50s. I'm like, what? Yeah, but we are practical people, John. He said, we don't have the same use of that word like your religious priests and all these guys use that word sacred, but they're using it like control for you, but we're practical people. We don't think like that, he said. I'm like, well, how do you think? He said, well, everybody among my people know that once you get married and have children, you go crazy. You lose sight of yourself. And he said, so for that phase of your life, between age of 23, 24, and maybe 40, 50 years old, you're insane because you don't get any sleep. Your children keep you up all night. They're always pulling at you, yelling at you, screaming, and you're pulling your hair out. You don't like your wife anymore. She don't like you. You don't like anything. You don't like your life. You can't wait to go hunting with the men for 2 weeks at a time just so you can get yourself back again. I'm like, so sacred doesn't apply to that. That's it? He said, pretty much. That's how it is. I'm like, whoa, what does that mean? He said, we're practical people. He said, that way all the elderlies remember that person is crazy. We have to support them. We have to look after their children for them. We have to, when you see mom about to pull her own hair out and her tears are starting to flow, elderly women come and grab her, bring her aside and help her to cry some and remember a little bit about who she is. No, my people know this. We have to look after the little ones and raise them because parents are too crazy to help. Raise your hand if that sounds familiar. Yeah, we need a word for that. Anyway, around the edge, I am traveling. Around the edge, I am traveling in a sacred manner. I am traveling. What is sacred? Well, only thing I could come up with when Gilbert and I talked about it long enough, he said, we have a word, wakan, in my language. He said, this is what they say means sacred. He said, but wakan, it does not mean like sacred in the way you use it. He said, these things, these blue lines in my arms, veins, you called them. He said, these are kan. Kan. He said, bowstring, kan. He said, lightning in a line or stripe is kan. Anything in the universe that is in a string or a line is kan. Wa kan means all of them. So I'm like, connection. He said, yeah, connection to things. He said, that's what this word means. He said, we build connection to his creation over time. We raise our children such that they build relationship with all the little beings, little insects when they're young, butterflies and bees and things like this. As they get older, we ask them questions around, what is that animal doing over there? They go and watch and they come back and tell us what they think, and we ask them good questions in return until they build that understanding for themselves. This is what we do. It's how we raise our children. I'm like, bam, right there. That's the missing ingredient, everybody. We can't shortchange that journey because those antennas that I'm talking about, that get stretched by the culture, grow and grow and grow until a person has love for everything around them. Has love for everything around them. That's one of the attributes that comes when somebody's raised like this. They fall in love with everything in the natural world. They fall in love with the human beings. They fall in love with their ancestors and with the future generations. It's all hardwired, but it needs to be cultivated. The hardest part is to figure out how to scale it so that we can get it back into every single neighborhood again. Because if you weren't raised this way, you don't necessarily know how to do it. And so we have a layered problem of remediation. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't fix the parents without fixing the elders. You can't fix the elders without fixing the children, so to speak, right? And so now I put all those Legos in that box on a map. And I said, well, from 0 to 5, this is what they seem to be doing. From 5 to about 9, 10, this is what they seem to be doing. From 10 through the teen years into early adulthood, this is what they seem to be doing. And so I layered the map this way. Stage of life, age of life. Because they're not the same. In America, you go through the stage of life till you reach adolescence, and you never get initiated, so you go through your entire adult life as an adolescent. In indigenous cultures, adolescence is met with adolescence initiation and rite of passage, and then young adulthood is met with an initiatory thing, and then adulthood is, and so there's initiations all the way till you pass away, the last initiation, right? We don't have that in America. We don't even get to be initiated as adolescents. So I basically layered all this stuff and found it all, put it all on a giant map. And I spent the last 40 years trying to figure out what to do with this map, and I don't want to die with it. So I'll probably spend the next 40 years figuring out how to make sure you all have it before I'm gone. And then you can all stare at it and try to figure out how to fix globally systemic Stockholm Syndrome by bringing back the old ways of mentoring with nature. No, thank you.
Thank you.